everyone, and welcome to our lesson, an online lesson. This is International Master Camila Ciobanu, and my student for today is David. Hello, David.
Hi, Cami. How are you?
I am wonderful, thank you. And you?
Good, thanks. Very good.
I'm so glad that we can do this together so other people can see and have an idea of how our lessons take place. It's an online lesson, as I said, and we do it with an audio call generally. And I would create a study in which I can upload some material that we can go through together. Then I will send you the link of the study so we can both have access to the same board. Okay, so I use generally the Lightus.org website, which I find so useful, especially for the studies. Great. So, David, I think we can start. As you know, generally we start with some puzzles, and then we can discuss about the strategy, touching on opening plans and ideas. We can see some end games as well, and studies. Generally, these five. Plus, we can select one of the Grandmaster's games and try to comment the moves together, try to understand what they meant to do in their games, and learn, of course, from their ideas. Okay, so I think we can start. I would ask you, please, David, if you could go to chapter number 4 that I'm having over here.
Yes.
Funny tactics. So generally we do like 4 or 5 puzzles to start with the session, but this time we will only do one, just like a model. And this is a funny one.
Yes.
So in this position, white is to move, and it won't be a checkmate, but the solution involves some material gain at some point. So I'll give you the time to think over it, and then we'll talk about it together.
Yeah, it's an interesting position, and normally I'm kind of, particularly with the puzzles, looking for some kind of tactic or something like that. And first look, I didn't see anything, and then what struck me is the positions of the rooks and the king, because typically late in the game like this, you wouldn't see it quite like that. Kind of just occurred to me that I could castle.
Oh,
And then I started looking castle king side, and then I saw, oh wow, I could castle queen side. So it just hit me. I don't know what made me think of that, but it obviously does two things. It creates a check and also threatens the rook.
okay. So you're talking about the long castles,
Yes.
right?
Yes, castling queen side. Yes.
Yeah, so that's a tricky move. Okay, so generally we wouldn't think of a castle,
Right.
but since the rook is kind of trapped over here on the queen side and it is infiltrated on the second rank, but we can't possibly, I mean, bring the king 2 moves because he will escape, obviously. But if simply we castle long, then we put his king in check. He has to move away and his rook remains undefended. Okay, it was even better if he had a pawn on c6. That would be a
Oh yeah.
checkmate.
Yeah.
Okay, but in this case, we simply gain one whole rook, and this is sufficient to win the game. Very well, David.
Yeah, it's an
Okay.
interesting position. Yeah.
Okay, I thank you so much for being here with me today. And I want you to know that David is our first Royal Crown Chess champion. We had a tournament last month uh, for my students and patrons, and David won it. Congratulations! It's been
Thank you.
such a beautiful tournament and long.
Yes, it was. It was. It was very fun though. It was nice to play. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Good. So here we have an endgame. I call it the power of the double because we have doubled pawns and generally they are considered a weak structure. But when this is all you've got and he's got none, no pawn, probably you should win. Let's see if we can find a winning solution for white in this endgame.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I realize given the black's king's position, I have to be very careful of
Yeah.
at least not a stalemate.
Exactly.
Not a lot of moves. Actually, right now, the king only really has, I guess, one move to g8.
So the secret in the end games is the opposition, especially when it's all about the kings and one or more pawns. It's all about the opposition. We can't take the opposition right away because it's a stalemate. It will be a draw. If we want to win.
Yeah, we almost, it appears to me here that we have to probably sacrifice the first pawn in order to get the opposition. Because otherwise I have to move the king away, which is not going to work. So I was...
Yes, even another option would be simply to push this pawn, but then he blocks the other pawn. And when we move away, he takes the pawn, and his king is in front of our pawn. We can't take the opposition, and that's also a draw. So indeed, first we promote to queen in order to attract the king on a bad spot. And this time when we take the opposition, we have the pawn behind our king. Okay, it's not in front of him. And this gives us the opportunity when he moves away, either way or the other, to bring the king, take the control of the promoting square, and then simply push the pawn and promote a queen and win in 6 moves. Very well, David. It's been a great example. And now we will talk about a real study in which white has a tremendous advantage. I'm not sure where I saw this position for the first time. If I remember well, it was somehow like this, maybe not precisely, but it's the same principle still. And I think white can win. Black, though, will try to force a stalemate, okay, because we can see that his king can't move, he can't move anything over here. He can only move the rook. Obviously, we can't take it because it's a stalemate. And I want to ask you, what do you think Black's plan would be in order to be able to force the draw?
Yeah, so given Black's position with his other pieces and the only one that can move being the rook, he would really like to get his rook taken, I would think, in order to force the stalemate.
Exactly. So he has to force the rook sacrifice in order to be put in a stalemate position. Okay, in a Zugzwang position, he can't move anything. And so it's a draw. Good. So what we need to do in order to win is to avoid the draw. And let's see, I'll give you a few moments to think about this position and then we can discuss.
Okay. Yeah, this is quite difficult. Looks like every move Black can put his rook in a place to get it taken where I almost have to take it. All right, let's see.
So he will try especially to check your king and sacrifice it or somewhere around. For example, if you go with your queen to f8, even threatening the checkmate on g7, he will simply bring the rook, check your king, there you go. He's chasing your king, like check, sacrifice. You can't take it, obviously. And he puts your king in check and check until you are forced to take it.
Yeah.
That's a
that's what's so difficult.
Yeah.
So the first thing that comes to mind is that I have to move the queen to some square. Of course, there's a lot of them, but I have to move the queen, I think, because if he takes the queen, then there's not much I can do, because then I can't take it with the rook. It's check, so I have to do something, either move either take. Yeah.
So maybe we should maintain the king covered with the queen and in the same time create a checkmate threat. So where can we get our queen?
Right. So the only square to do that would be G3.
Very well. Okay, so let's see. We bring the queen over to G3 and threaten the checkmate on H4. So what should black do in this case if he wants to prevent that?
Well, the only thing, I was looking at two things. One is rook to A4 or rook to A3. Rook to A3 check.
Yeah, exactly.
Just looking at rook to A4 though.
Even pinning the queen. Okay, so your queen can't move. And you can't take the rook. So how will you solve this situation?
And by the way, I guess rook to A4 doesn't work because white could move the king away.
Well,
or no?
Yeah, if you move it to H2, you could move the king to H2, and then yes.
Yeah.
If he checks you on H4, you take with the queen and it's a
check. Checkmate. Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Well, yeah. The only thing, she can't take the rook.
Of course, we can't.
Can't move the king.
You will take our queen, but we have to delay that. We have to delay that.
You have to push a pawn.
Exactly. Which pawn to start with?
If you push the E pawn, he just takes it.
Let him fight for the queen. So
so you'd start. I get. He's just going to keep taking. Oh, okay. I see something. Yeah. I guess you'd start with the B pawn.
Okay, we start with the B pawn. So we interrupt the communication between the rook and the queen, but of course he will stubbornly pin your queen with a rook sacrifice.
And I guess still there's no other move here other than to push the C pawn.
Exactly, and he takes it.
Just looking to see still if there's anything else. Can't move the queen because it's pinned. Yeah, so you have to push the D pawn. Push the D pawn.
Okay. Now you can make the move yourself because I'm making all the moves. But
okay. So I'll continue along that way to push here. Yes, then the rook now has a path to the H file.
Okay.
So then I imagine he would take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He takes.
Yeah. So then. Oh, I see. Hold on. So if I can't take it, I can't go check with the queen.
Okay, so I just want to ask you this.
Sure.
What's the difference between this position and this position? So this and this.
Biggest difference is that the rook now has the ability to go.
Okay, so the pawns are missing and you have opened a line for the rook. Now you can involve it into the attack.
Oh, I see. Yes, if you bring the rook to H2.
Okay, bring up the rook to H2. And so we invite him to be our guest and take the queen. But
yes.
When he does it now, we simply take back and we have a discovered check. And guess what? It's a checkmate.
Wow.
Okay, so let's see it from the beginning. Queen to G3, threatening the checkmate. He's trying to force the draw and we are avoiding it and opening up the line for the rook and create a checkmate threat. So guess what?
and so let me ask you, I would think the way, if you don't see it, which is very difficult to see, the way to play that is what we did, which I guess is you had no other choice really. So you might as well see if something develops, because we've looked at other, everything else would lead to a stalemate. Is that correct? That would be the best way, I guess, to figure this out across the board.
Yes. We have to have in mind what the opponent wants to do, and then just simply try to prevent it, but in the same time maintain our focus on the attack that we are doing. Okay, so this was the first part of our lesson. We saw a puzzle, the example of a tactical exercise. This is so important because it helps us to get trained to detect all those immediate threats that can occur during our games. It's very good to have this gymnastics going. And we saw an end game, which was a funny one and nice because of a pawn sacrifice and then win after the opposition, after taking the opposition. Then we saw the study in which had to understand that black wanted to force a draw, and we simply found a way to avoid it and win, because white should win. And then we will talk about strategy, and with this example also we can touch on some ideas of an opening, which is the Benoni, which starts generally so with pawn to d4, knight f6, c4, c5, d5, e6, knight c3, e takes, c takes, and after other moves we can reach this position. And we will talk about prophylaxis. I have this example from one of Mark Dvoretsky's books. Yeah, Mark Dvoretsky and Arthur Yusupov, they're talking about the positional play. And this is such a good example in the prophylaxis theme. It's a strategic theme. And during our lessons, we can touch on other strategic principles that help us construct a strong position, okay, with much potential for winning. That's what we want. Good. So we have this middle game position in which white is to play. And what I would like to ask you is, how would you continue from this moment on? We can analyze the position a little bit, try to understand what white's plan is, what black's plan is, and then how we'll make it happen.
Sure. Yeah, I'm looking. So from a piece perspective, it looks even.
Yes.
Black's bishop is on a good diagonal. Actually, both of Black's bishops appear to be on pretty good diagonals. White's bishop, light sword bishop is blocked, I guess, a little bit by his pawns. So it's
Okay.
just trying to see other things in the position.
Let's talk about the pawn structure. Okay. What can you tell me about it? And about the center? We have to deal with a semi-closed center. The king's castled on the same side, and the center is not closed, so it's semi-closed. Yep. Means that the center has the potential to open easily. So in light of this, we understand that we shouldn't bring the bishop to f4, but the pawn. That's the square for the pawn. Okay, so the order of our thinking in chess should be this. First, we see the big plan, and then the smaller ideas that help us accomplish that plan. And then ultimately, okay, we think of the moves, the small steps that help us to realize the small ideas and put together, they make the plan be fulfilled. So the question is, what is black going to do? I mean, we have a pawn's majority in the center, which tells us we want to create a passed pawn and promote in the center. So what is black going to do in this case?
Well, in terms of his overall plan, I would think he would want to expand on the on his queen side where he has the pawn majority.
Very well. He's got 3 pawns against 2. And so his plan is the same. Just push the pawns, make a passed pawn, and promote. So let's see who's the one being able to do it in the end. Okay, it doesn't mean that it will just happen as we said. Maybe we'll just make a passed pawn, and then other weaknesses will be made in black's territory. All of a sudden his king gets exposed or something happens, we go and checkmate the king. But the main line is that, okay, if something better comes up along the way, that's even better. If not, we stick with our original plan. Good. So the question is it a good idea, since this is the plan, I want to push the pawn, should I push it right away, or should I prepare it somehow? And in order to understand that, we should see what black wants to do, what weaknesses can be made in our camp. Okay, and I will let you tell me, I don't know, 1 or 2 candidate moves. We already saw bishop f4, which then eliminated. Now we can think of pawn to e4, see if it works. Otherwise, we will still think of yet another candidate move.
Yeah, so I am looking at pawn to e4, but you know, you had said something to me recently which really resonated, which is, if I'm, you know, one of the things I should consider if I'm not sure on a specific move what to do. I know my plan, I know kind of some of the general ideas, what should I do? And one of the things you had said is rearrange some pieces, perhaps to better squares, because and the pawn to f4 is obviously something that will need to be done. In order to do that, I would need to move the knight. So I am still wondering if I can do e4 first, although I'm guessing there might be a problem with that, although it is protected 3 times. One of the moves I'd like to look at is h3, which I think might serve 2 purposes. One is to be able to move the knight to h2 to get it out of the way of the f-pawn, but also because I think it's probably better going there than to d2, which blocks the bishop. So that was one possible move.
Okay.
So those would be the main 2 moves I think that I would.
Okay, good. I think also when we select a candidate move that seems to help us in accomplishing one idea is also just calculate what happens, what our opponent's best continuation would be, see if that works. And if we are not satisfied with the end result, then we should prepare that move. For example, if I push e4 directly, we know that whenever we push a pawn, we leave some weaknesses behind. In this case, the pawn is controlling 2 squares. Potentially, it can also control d4 if it moves only 1 step. But since we moved it up, now d3 remains weak, f3 remains weak, even d4. Okay,
yes.
It's to find a way for black to get to d4, even to f3, but what about d3? Because his bishop is already controlling it, even the weak square on c4, okay? So have a complex.
Yeah.
So what piece do you think black should install or try to install over there?
Yeah, so a knight would be very strong there.
Okay, a knight. So if he tries to bring this knight, we will
Yeah.
be able to trade. We exchange it. Of course, he will not take with the pawn because we have the passed pawn already. So if he takes by the rook, our pawns can move. Okay, I'm not sure we can do it right away, but it just helps us in our plan. But he can make something in order to be able to keep a knight on e5 even after the trade, and then
Yes.
go there.
Okay. I think I see. And it's interesting because the move before I kind of saw that. So he could move the knight on f6 to g4.
Yes. So now even if we send it
Yeah.
away, it gets in the center. Even if we exchange it, it comes in with another knight, and black is gaining so much space, and we don't like this position anymore. Okay,
Yeah.
it becomes
Yeah.
very comfortable.
Quickly happens too. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we don't have to hurry, even if when we know what we have to do, just make sure that our opponent doesn't really have a counterplay idea. Okay, and so try to prevent what he wants to do. So in order to prevent the knight from going to g4, as you said, white's best move is pawn to h3, which is a prophylactic move, but by simply moving it, it shows that we have understood our plan and his idea, and we want to prevent his infiltration. Okay, let's see how this game continues. It is the game played at the 5th candidates match in Tilburg 1986 between Artur Yusupov and Timan. So this is how this game continued. After h3, black brought the knight on e5. We're at move number 13. Now move number 14. White takes the knight, rook takes. Finally, white brings the pawn in the center. And now white wants to push f4, attacking the rook, so he already retreats it. And white develops the bishop on e3. And guess what? Black is bringing the other knight around with the same idea of bringing a knight on d3. So what do you think white should play now?
So now f4 to prevent that knight from moving there.
Exactly. Now we continue with our idea of gaining more control of the center and ultimately preparing the push on e5. And black, I'm glad to tell you that doesn't renounce so easily on his idea. Okay, now he pushes c4 and he has two outposts on our weak squares, and the knight wants to come through c5 to d3. So he makes up a new path for the knight. Okay, now white will make a positional sacrifice. Okay, pushing the pawn to e5, even having to sacrifice it. Okay, because then you see, now he opened up the light squared bishop, even attacking the rook that has to move. White is 2 steps from promotion, and his bishops are very active. And now this is a very important move that white does in this moment. He pushes the pawn up to f5, so he avoids the trade, which means that black's pawn remains on e5, and thus making the other pieces very passive. You know, the bishop is blocked, the rook is blocked, the knight is blocked, and the pawn on c4 again keeps the bishop and the rook passive, only defending a pawn, right? So after f5,
wow, yeah, it's a powerful move.
Yes, we have enough compensation for the material loss, but knight to c5, stubbornly trying to get to d3. This is how Timan played. Let's see how Yusupov responded to this threat. So the question here is, shall we let black do that or not?
Yeah, I'm trying to see. I would think we probably not want to let that occur, although it's hard to stop. So I'm wondering if there's a way to create another threat somehow. I mean, I guess you could certainly take the knight with the bishop, but I'm not sure that's a good idea. It's a good bishop.
Okay, indeed, generally we shouldn't trade that bishop unless it is for a really, really good purpose. And I
Yeah.
think this is one of those exceptions in which
Okay.
we can trade this bishop. Also because the light squared bishop is no longer blocked. Okay, so it became a good bishop itself.
Mhm.
But I think black's most active piece is the knight. It's the only piece that can cause white some trouble. So white just decides to take it down because then black remains with all his pieces passive, basically. And white can bring his knight in the center, attacking the rook. Um, and then when the rook goes down, okay, I'm not sure how the game continued after 94, but let's just assume that if black goes back, now white could develop the rook and threaten the fork. Yeah, pawn to d7 with a fork.
Mhm.
So if black tries to block it, now white could even push the other pawn and block the dark squared bishop even more. And white has a very nice position. His piece is being well developed, strong, active, open on open lines, okay, mostly. And so it's easy to play from this moment. And
Yes.
white would think of remaneuvering the knight, maybe to get it to e7, and the queen to d2 and h6, who knows, and knight e7.
Yes.
Okay,
Wow.
just try to.
Yes, there's a lot of options. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Indeed. Okay, so this was the example that I wanted to show you on our strategy talk. And we saw how important the prophylaxis is. We shouldn't only think of our own moves and ideas, but also of our opponent's counterplay ideas. And what is the most important thing, I think, that we talked about was the order of our thinking process, that first we have to have in mind the big plan and then the small ideas. And after we have the vision on this, then the natural moves just follow,
Yeah. Mhm.
So we select the candidate moves, and by the calculation, we choose the best move, the move that best serves our purposes.
Yes.
Okay, David. So I hope you enjoyed this today's lesson. Generally, our lessons will last for 55 minutes to 1 hour. It depends. And this is how how we do it. Yeah, and I think it's enjoyable. I think we can learn so much together and strengthen our play. And many times, as you know, I would set up a position which is new for both generally, or just for you.
Yes.
And we play from that point and see what ideas we can come up with if we understand the position and the plan, and we play it. And when we finish, we analyze it, and we see also how the actual players conducted that game and who
Yes.
won in the end. Okay, David, if you have any other question or if you would like to add something.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to add, I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to add that I think and this is a great example of this particular problem, because this is something also that, we can go through positions like this, and yes, we can learn a lot, and I can learn a lot from these specific positions, but what's also really useful and what I really appreciate is that it also gives me a way of analyzing another position. So it's, we can use it to learn, to improve generally, as opposed to, because these patterns exist, and also just, what you said earlier, trying to see where, pawn majority in the center versus for white versus black's pawn majority on the queen side. You
Yeah.
can just, apply those in other games. So this is just amazingly helpful, and I just really appreciate the lessons. You're doing a great job.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone who is watching. And what more can I say? I hope to see you in one of my Simul events or live tournaments, or open workshops. We will see. And I even invite you to become one of my students, and so we can study chess together. We have a nice community. Even when we play the simultaneous, we get to talk to each other, get to know each other. Right, David?
Yeah, this has been very enjoyable. I definitely recommend this.
Okay. Thank you again, David. Thank you, everyone. And I'll talk to you in one of our next videos. This is International Master Camelia Ciobanu. Remain tuned because I have more news for you. All the best.
Bye. Thanks, Cami.
Thank you. Bye-bye.